We now have a staff report from our Public Safety Director, Chief Alan Hill, a very timely report, and we're looking forward to hearing it from you. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Honor, Counsel. I think before I begin tonight, I'd just like to say a couple of words. Obviously, since May 25th, it's been a very trying time in our country. Especially with police-citizens relations, with all the events that are going around in the country, that are continuing to go around the country today. And I just want to take a moment to address that. On June 11th, I issued a public statement regarding the tragic events that led to the death of Mr. George Floyd. That statement can be found on the city's website. What happened to Mr. Floyd on May 25th was shocking and caused heartbreak and anger to millions of Americans across this great country. That officer's actions and those who stood by and watched violated the oath of more than 750,000 men and women who dedicate their lives daily to serve their communities. To say the members of the law enforcement profession nationwide are not outraged by what occurred in Minneapolis is an understatement. The actions of those officers single-handedly erodes the trust of our profession in communities across this country, including ours. I want to be clear to everybody who's listening at home. In no way, shape, or form are the actions demonstrated by those Minneapolis officers on May 25th indicative of the character of the men and women of the Oakwood Public Safety Department and our commitment to protecting and serving this wonderful community. The actions of those Minneapolis officers should not and cannot diminish the relationships that we, members of the safety department, have built within this community for decades. I'm committed and I stand ready to join my fellow law enforcement executives in this critically important quest to restore the faith in policing in the policing profession across this nation. So thank you.
Thanks you.
Staff report. Switching gears here a little bit. Tonight I'm going to just update you on a significant capital improvement that we acquired earlier in the year, personnel changes. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our department operations, our recruitment. If you guys remember in the fall, we had a resident address council and talk a little bit about our recruitment process, where we obtain new hires from. Talk about use of force. Obviously, it's a daily topic. The Ohio Collaborative process, and last, the 2020 Citizens Police Academy. That being said, earlier this year in March, the Safety Department obtained a complete replacement of a comprehensive replacement of our extrication tools and our vehicle stabilization equipment. Outside of the life pack units that we carry on the medic, you could argue that this is probably one of the single most valuable life safety pieces of equipment we have. Because if you have somebody entrapped in a vehicle, it is these tools here that are commonly referred to as the jaws of life are what's going to safely remove that person from the vehicle. Our old tools were about 20 years old. Over that time, the construction and the materials comprised within the metals of vehicles has significantly changed, and a common phrase that you hear is ultra-high strength steel. These tools were very much needed because the tools that we had, that we replaced, were not capable of cutting that kind of steel. I read an article about a year ago, and I believe your average Honda Accord is now made up of almost 40% ultra-high strength steel. You're not even getting into the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Teslas, and some of these higher-end European cars that are all high ultra-strength steel. So this was a very much needed upgrade for us. At the same time, we replaced our vehicle stabilization equipment, and this is a 20-year capital expenditure. So although it is a significant investment, they will be around for a long time. Personnel changes. I know Lieutenant Yount was here a couple times in council chambers where we acknowledged his career, but on April 2nd, Lieutenant Yount did retire with over 30 years of service to the city of Oakwood. At the time of his retirement, he was the longest tenured public safety officer, working for 5 different chiefs. Just a note there's only been 7 chiefs since the 1950s, and he saw 2 generations of public safety officers retire. He had a very long and successful, rewarding career here in the city of Oakwood, did quite a bit, and we all wish Jeff well in his retirement. He's currently in our thoughts right now, both him and his son, Public Safety Officer Jeff Yount Jr. Jeff lost his mom a couple days ago unexpectedly, and so Yount Sr.'s in our thoughts right now. So Jeff, if you're listening, we're thinking about you. A hit and run accident, one of the things that we pride ourselves on our department for years is, regardless of the nature of the complaint, the significance of the complaint, we treat all incidents the same in Oakwood. We will investigate anything and everything as thoroughly as we can to bring it to a conclusion. And this is just a recent example that I thought it would be important to highlight. What you're seeing here is some trees that were demolished in a hit-and-run accident on Schroyer and Greenmount on July the 6th. The next morning, Captain Jones and Public Safety Officer Jack Harrison went to the accident scene to follow up. Significant damage to the trees also results to significant damage to a vehicle. So they followed the evidence. They followed pavement markings southbound on Schroyer, and while doing so, they came across a witness who indicated that they observed a white BMW with a flat tire, hence the pavement markings, grinding the rims on the pavement. So Captain Jones and Officer Harrison continued to follow the pavement markings and located a fresh oil spill with diamond dye over it some 8 blocks away. Going off his gut instinct, Captain Jones made contact with a resident in the area and located the person responsible for the hit and run. This is just another highlight that the safety department investigates all complaints received, regardless of how minor the incident. They did a great job in solving this case and bringing it to a resolution. I don't want to say anything about other jurisdictions, but not everybody, due to call volume, resources, or just frankly the seriousness of the complaint, that would probably take the time, energy, and effort to go out and investigate and bring to a conclusion a hit-and-run accident involving trees. So with that being said, I just thought it would be nice to just illustrate, highlight this particular incident, and to acknowledge Captain Jones, Officer Harrison, and Officer Wells for their job on this. So I appreciate their effort. Mission statement. I'm going to talk a little bit about our department operations, who we are a little bit. There's a lot of comments that have been made publicly about who we are as individuals, what comprises us, how we're made up as an organization. And we have a mission, and our mission is to work in partnership with all citizens to enhance the quality of life by providing superior police, fire, and EMS services. We've talked about it before, but not everybody truly understands what we do as an organization. We are the sole consolidated public safety department in the state of Ohio. I know you guys are aware, but not everybody at home is. Nobody operates in the state of Ohio the way we do, with consolidated police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics, and we pride ourselves on providing quality service in all 3. We have 3 core values. Integrity. We're committed to the integrity by upholding community trust. We're dedicated through our dedication, through our loyalty to the community. And finally, respect. Treating all people with dignity and in an unbiased manner. Our mission, vision, and values was not something that was created last September after the Able report was introduced, or on May 26th after the George Floyd incident. Our mission, vision, and values have been around for over a decade. This is who we are as individuals. This is our commitment to the citizens in the community in which we serve. Our principles of operation, first and foremost, to protect the life and property of all citizens and anybody passing through our community, to promote the promotion of a safe and secure environment, and again, to provide superior police, fire, and EMS services. Officer recruitment. To get hired as a public safety officer, what are the requirements? Well, you need to be a U.S. citizen, 21 years of age, possess a valid driver's license, and we use a lateral entry hiring process. What does that mean? It means you need to be certified full-time and certified in one of the 3 disciplines. So at the time of hire, you already have to be a certified police officer, you have to be a certified career firefighter, and/or you have to be a certified paramedic. On top of that, you've had to successfully complete 12 months of full-time service and currently be employed as a full-time police officer, career firefighter, or paramedic. So in other words, to get hired at Oakwood, you already have to be certified in one of the 3 disciplines, you have to currently be working full-time, and you have to possess at least 12 months of full-time experience. If you look over the last decade, our average new hire has about 6.5 years of experience, and most recently, we hired Officer Chris Sloan from Mason, who actually had 17 years of experience. So, but 6.5 is about the average. The officer selection process, it starts with the completion of a 50-plus page application packet. You have to complete 2 oral board interviews, a comprehensive character background investigation. You have to complete and successfully pass 2 truth verification tests. There's been a lot of talk about psychological exams in the police hiring process across the nation. The Oakwood Public Safety Department in the city of Oakwood has used psychological exams for decades here within the city, within our hiring process. And ultimately, you have to complete a medical exam. Where do we attract candidates from? The answer is simple: all over the region. We're not continually hiring individuals from the same departments. Here's just a list in the last 10 years where some of the talent we have on our department today has come from. Amberley Village, Beaver Creek Fire Department, Bellbrook Fire Department, Dayton Police and Fire Departments, Fairborn, Kettering Fire Department, Kettering Police Department, Mason Police Department, the Miami Valley Fire District, the Miamisburg Police Department, the Middletown Fire Department, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, the Moraine Police Department, the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and the Riverside Police Department. So we're attracting candidates from all over the Miami Valley region each and every time that we put out an advertisement for hire. We're a committed equal opportunity employer, and we do our best to attract candidates of all races and genders from all over the region. Use of force. I think almost daily you could turn on a news channel and find some type of conversation with regards to police and use of force. Here in the city of Oakwood, we've had a culture of accountability with regards to use of force for years. The Oakwood Public Safety Department has a comprehensive use of force policy covering all facets of the application of force, the documentation of use of force incidents, and the administrative review of use of force incidents. Our use of force numbers. In 2016, as a department, we had 6 incidences of use of force. In 2017, we had 6 incidents as well. In 2018, we had 3 incidences of use of force. In 2019, we had 3. And year to date, in 2020, we have not had to use force at all. It should be noted, during this same time period, the Public Safety Department has made over 1,000 arrests and has conducted in excess of 15,000 traffic stops. That's 16,000 just in these 2 categories alone, over 1,000 arrests and 15,000 traffic stops. That's 16,000 potential adversarial encounters that our officers have had with members of the community and across the region that's resulted in 18 use of force incidents. The chances of us using force in just these two incidents alone, where we would have to use force on any individual, is 1/1000th of 1%. We've been approached by several, I'm not just saying Oakwood citizens of the region, when we're out engaged in law enforcement actions in the community, where somebody stops and says, I just want to make sure that person is okay. I want to make sure you're doing everything you should be doing. Well, I hope people are listening to these numbers. We've had 16,000 potential adversarial encounters that resulted in 18 use of force incidents. I'm going to talk about de-escalation and de-escalation training and in professionalism. 1/1000th of 1%. So my response to that question is when have we ever given anybody a reason that somebody would not be okay when they're in the care of our custody? Following the tragic death of George Floyd, much discussion has occurred locally, statewide, and nationally with regards to use of force policies. One of the number one things that was talked about for a while was the 8 that can't wait police reform. Research showed that more restrictive use of force policies can reduce killings by police and save lives. This is the campaign that said, tell your cities to adopt all 8 of these policies, they break down statistically, percentage-wise, each of the 8, and when you added them all together, there was a reduction in deaths of suspects by 72% on this particular study if the 8 of these individual things were incorporated into a use of force policy. I'm going to go through them in order here. Bans of chokeholds. For everybody out there, here's the Oakwood Public Safety Department for counsel. Here's our policy with regards to carotid control holds. The proper application of a carotid control hold may be effective in restraining a violent or combative individual. However, due to the potential for injury, the Safety Department prohibits officers from using such holds or similar control techniques as a routine defensive control tactic. The use of a carotid control hold by officers is only authorized when it is reasonably necessary to prevent the death or serious physical harm. I'm sure somebody out there is asking the question, have we ever had to apply such or a similar hold in a use of force situation? And the answer is yes. The last time was in 2008 when we were involved in a foot pursuit with a burglary suspect that we caught coming out of somebody's front door of their house. So in 2008 was the last time that this hold was applied. It's not used as a routine defensive control tactic, and it can only be used when it is necessary to prevent death or serious physical harm. The follow-up to that, any individual who has had a carotid neck hold applied, regardless of whether he or she was rendered unconscious, shall be promptly examined by the on-duty paramedic or other qualified person. The officer shall inform any person receiving custody of that individual that such hold has been placed on them, whether that individual has lost consciousness or not. And the final component of that is really 2 components. If an officer would ever apply such hold, they're required to notify the on-duty supervisor that such hold was placed on an individual or attempted to be placed on an individual, and they're required to document it via a use of force report and a normal incident report. That's for chokeholds. De-escalation. De-escalation and de-escalation training is nothing new to the Oakwood Public Safety Department. Over the past several years, the Safety Department has provided periodic de-escalation trainings through various in-service trainings. Most recently, public safety officers completed law enforcement de-escalation trainings both last month in June and July of 2020. And according to the governor's press conference a few weeks back on this particular issue, it looks like by the end of the year there's going to be 6 more hours of training coming on this topic. But like I said, for us, I started law enforcement in 1997, and I believe I attended my first de-escalation training in 1999, and I've been periodically receiving training on this topic for the last 20 plus years. You know, I know a lot of people have questions about, well, training isn't enough. How do you practice it? How do you continue to get proficient in it? The answer is every day. We're using de-escalation and de-escalation tactics every day. On every traffic stop we make, on citizen encounters, and I'll give you a couple examples for me. Is the night of June 11th, the night of the event, there were some vehicles, we had on Chance, between Schaefer and Delwood and Spirea was closed, and we were using that as a staging location on the night of the rally. And after the rally was over, or the event was over, several officers were leaving from another jurisdiction, and they had their cruisers parked in the angled parking spots right there along the stadium. And as I walked down to move the barricades, because the road closed sign was in the middle of the road, I passed a group of juveniles, 4 or 5 of them. A couple of them I recognized in this, around the city, so I'm going to assume they're Oakwood residents, and other ones I did not. And of course, as I walked by, I acknowledged, I said hello to them. They all immediately looked away, didn't respond back. So in law enforcement, that's our first cue. I'm walking down the street, I just say hi, you won't even look or respond back. So as I walk back, I know they're behind me, so I'm paying attention to what they're doing. I removed the barricade from the roadway, and all of a sudden they're now on the sidewalk walking right past me. And as they walk right past me, they start with the "here, piggy, 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 I smell bacon, oink, oink, oink" comments, and all they're trying to do is elicit a response from me. And I realize that. So when we talk about de-escalation, there's 2 ways I could approach this. There was no doubt in the manner in which they were speaking to me, if I wanted to have a confrontation, they were willing and ready to have a confrontation. So how did I respond? I pulled out my phone, I probably hit ESPN app, looked up whatever was going on in sports, and once they realized they weren't going to get that response, they made a couple comments, and then they continued and they walked off. That's de-escalation. 2 weeks ago, I took a phone call from a citizen who was very upset the fact that the Amazon delivery driver was parked facing the wrong way on the road. We're all upset about that, and we need to get them parking the right way. But let's just say the first 30 seconds of that conversation was not very pleasant on the receiving end, and I was the receiving end. Once again, if I wanted an argument with that individual, I could have immediately started an argument. But it goes back to our de-escalation training that we are practicing every single day on a traffic stop. Our officers responded to an incident today at around noon. It was the exact same thing. If they wanted an argument, probably if they wanted a use of force, the opportunity was there. But they used the training, the professionalism, and the makeup of their character as an individual, as an officer, to diffuse the situation that resulted in no incident. So when we talk about de-escalation and de-escalation training as it relates to the members of our department, it's every single day. Every single day we face an encounter that if we're not using these training techniques, we don't end up with 18 uses of forces and 16,000 adversarial encounters. So as you know, it's all the time that we're engaged in de-escalation type techniques. Required warnings before shooting was the third one of the 8. There is no legal requirement to do so, to provide a warning before shooting. The courts have recognized that law enforcement encounters are fast evolving and rapidly changing dynamic situations, and a warning may not always be feasible. Quick example is if you walk up on a traffic stop and the person who's driving the vehicle or a passenger vehicle has a gun pointed at the officer, and as soon as they come in view, they pull the trigger. It's not feasible to put something in place that requires an officer, when they're being actively shot at, to give a warning before they're required, before they can return fire and protect their own life or potentially the life of somebody else. With that, the fourth one is exhaust all alternatives before shooting. Anytime an officer is involved in deploying their firearm in the line of duty, it's to defend their life or somebody else. It's a deadly force situation. It's the highest level of force that we can use. Deadly force can only be used in two specific areas. An officer may use deadly force to protect himself or others from what he or she reasonably believes would be an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. Or an officer may use deadly force to stop a fleeing subject when the officer has probable cause to believe that person has committed, intends to commit, a felony involving the infliction or threatened infliction of serious bodily injury or death, and the officer reasonably believes that there's an imminent risk of serious bodily injury or death to another person. Under this situation, where we are going after a fleeing subject, a verbal warning should precede the use of deadly force where and when feasible. So we do have a provision with regards to the second application of justification of deadly force, that we will give a warning to a fleeing subject where and when feasible. So exhaust all alternatives. All alternatives are exhausted before an officer deploys their firearm in the line of duty, because these are the only two justifiable incidents where an officer has the authority to use deadly force. Duty to intervene. A lot of conversation about duty to intervene. Any officer present or observing another officer using force that is clearly beyond to which is objectively reasonable under the situation, when in a position to do so, shall intercede to prevent the use of unreasonable force. You know, there's a lot of talk about not only that officer up in Minnesota, but the 3 officers that stood around for the 9 minutes and watched that horrific incident. And I've been personally asked questions by the community, by members of the community, is do we have a policy in place that prohibits or that would require an officer to intercede and act if they would see something like that? And the answer is absolutely we do. Any officer who observes another employee using force that exceeds the degree of force permitted by law should promptly report these observations to a supervisor, and they should stop the force. It is in our use of force policy and has been in for years. Ban shooting at and from moving vehicles. The Oakwood Public Safety Department prohibits the discharging of a firearm at or from a moving motor vehicle unless the officer reasonably believes that such action is in defense of human life. Once again, it is banned with exception if the officer has to defend his life or somebody else's. Use of force continuum. One of the recommendations is that law enforcement agencies follow a use of force continuum, a force-on-force continuum, or something of that nature. The Safety Department follows the action response use of force continuum, and officers shall use the continuum as a guideline whenever force is used. And here's actually a copy of that policy, or that continuum, that starts with mere officer presence and goes all the way up to deadly force, and it's broken down into the individual's actions or in comparison to the officer's response. So it specifically says if a subject is pulling away from the officer, refusing to move, dead weight, what kind of officer's responses are reasonable? Strike muscle groups, takedowns, joint manipulations, pressure points. It's laid out within this action response continuum. There is some officer subject factors such as age, size, skill level, relative strength. 5'10" officer, female officer weighing 105 pounds, 6'6", 280-pound male. Would that female officer have the ability to escalate their use of force based on certain subject factors? The answer is yes. Comprehensive reporting. Reporting a use of force. Any use of force by a member of this department shall be documented promptly, completely, and accurately. In addition to completing an alert report, which is our basic incident reporting, you also have to complete a use of deadly force, physical force report. So here in the city of Oakwood, any and all applications of use of force have to be promptly documented, completed, and submitted to their supervisor. The supervisor's responsibility, and I'm not going to read this word for word, supervisor has a lot of responsibility, from as far as responding to the scene, obtaining the facts, and ensuring that injured parties are examined and treated, to obtain witness statements, to conduct interviews if necessary, and ultimately provide a memorandum of the subject statement if one is obtained to go with the original report. Once that medical assessment has been completed, take any appropriate photographs for evidence, identify witnesses, but ultimately what it comes down to is, in addition to all of this, they need to review all and approve all related reports that have been submitted by all officers, and they need to notify the on-call command staff member, which would be myself or one of the two captains, if the application of force results in an individual being hospitalized. So quick scenario, we're involved in a situation that results in a use of force where we take down a subject and they hit their head on the concrete. The on-duty paramedic gets on there and recommends that he be transported to the hospital to be evaluated. In addition to the use of force report that's being completed by the officer and the supervisors reviewing that report and gathering additional information, command staff members also being notified immediately at that time of what had occurred as well. The supervisor shall initiate steps to begin an internal investigation if it is reasonable to believe that the application of force by the officer was not within policy. The investigation or complaint form will then be directed to myself for further investigation. So the reviewing supervisor has the obligation that if they're reviewing a report and the justification of force was not within policy, to take the next step and initiate an investigation or a complaint form related to that incident. With regards to the administrative review, after the on-duty supervisor reviews the report, subsequently it is forwarded to the operations captain, who reviews the report as well. Part of the reason that he's reviewing the report for compliance within policy, and once the operations captain reviews the report, it's automatically forwarded to me for final review as well. So with regards to our review policy, we have the initial on-duty supervisor reviewing the report, we have the operations captain reviewing the report, and myself. These are all three supervisory reviews are conducted on all use of forces. It's not only if it requires hospitalization or anything. A simple armbar takedown that results in a handcuffing of a subject that has a use of force report completed would go through these same steps. And then ultimately, at the end of the year, the operations captain prepares a use of force report regarding the incidents, and we look for any trends in use of force by members, training needs, equipment needs, policy revisions, things of that nature. You know, a lot has come out with regards to the officer up in Minnesota and the number of use of forces he had over a specified period of time, whether you want to look at it from a 1-year, 2-year, 5-year area. When they talk about our officers and monitoring our officers, how do you know your officers aren't using too much force and using force too many times? As I shared our numbers, we had 18 uses of force over 4 years. We had an officer within our department that had 9 uses of force in 1 year. They're going to stand out because they have 50% of a 4-year average by themselves in 1 year. So for us, with regards to application of force involving suspects we encounter, or subjects we encounter, I should say, is we keep a close eye. Because we're fortunate, we have very low use of force numbers, and like I said, I think it's to the professionalism, it goes to the character of the officers, their training, their background, to handle potentially violent situations with individuals that we encounter, and we're able to use this as analysis. So we have a use of force reporting requirement, we have a 3-step supervisory review process, and then ultimately, annually, we're going through an overall use of force analysis to look for policy failures, training needs, equipment needs, or identify any trends within an individual or individuals, meaning we have somebody whose use of force numbers are inconsistent with the rest of the department. Any questions on those 8 things? On the 8 can't wait police reform?
Any questions for Chief?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to switch gears real quick and talk about the Ohio Collaborative. I could probably talk for 2 hours alone about the collaborative and the collaborative process. So to streamline it for everybody at home, I put the website on this slide. If you have more interest in learning about what the Ohio Collaborative process and the Community Police Advisory Board. It was established in 2014 as the Ohio Collaborative Community Police Advisory Board. It was created to oversee implementation of recommendations for statewide policing standards in a variety of areas. Although voluntary, the Ohio Collaborative certification process provides for an independent review of a police agency to demonstrate transparency, modern methods and standards, and open critique and feedback from assessors. There's an assessor assigned to our organization that essentially comes in the specific areas, and I'll talk about them here in a second, that they are reviewing, where they provide critique and feedback on whether or not we are going to show or demonstrate compliance with the state standard or not. In 2016, the Oakwood Safety Department received its initial certification for use of force and recruitment hiring standards, and that was Group 1 standards. At that time in 2016, these were the only 2 standards in which you could demonstrate compliance, and on December 14th, we received our final certification. Once you obtain your certification, you are required to be recertified every 3 years, where you have to show compliance documents. So in the spring of 2020, they got a little bit behind due to everything going on with COVID, but we demonstrated and were recertified in Group 1 standards with recruiting and hiring and use of force. Subsequently, in 17 and 18 and 19, there's been additional standards that have been implemented. And we also received certification in Group 2 standards, which is community engagement and telecommunicator training, dispatch training, and then Group 3 standards, which is bias-based policing and investigation of employee misconduct. So we currently, there are 3 groups of standards that are available to be certified in, and we are certified in all 3. With regards to us achieving these standards, we didn't have to change the way we do business. We just showed them how we do business, and we met all requirements provided by the state. The most recent Group 4 standard, although we just received our Group 3 certification, Group 4, which is vehicle pursuits, it became a standard after our recertification process. And Captain Przinski, this week, we're gathering all the documentation now. We'll be submitting for Group 4 standards, although we're not required to meet those until our next recertification period. So I have every expectation that we will be Group 4 certified as well here in the matter of the next month or so. Any questions about the Ohio Collaborative?
So we passed these standards even before we were mandated to pass these standards.
Yeah, each standard has a compliance checklist, and for you to achieve certification, let's say in a bias-free policing, you have to engage in certain practices, whether that's reporting, whether that's statistical data, whether that's policy compliance, and there's a compliance checklist that is associated with each specific standard statement, and you provide documents of proof, such as your policy, training records, reporting records, reviews, whatever that standard says. So each, let's say for bias policing, you have standard 1.1.A, 1.2.A. You have to show a compliance document for every standard within whatever the overall standard you're trying to achieve.
You see?
The Oakwood Citizens Police Academy, I just want to conclude with this. It's that time of year again for us. This is our third Citizens Police Academy. So in September, we will host our third Citizens Police Academy. This is more of a shameless plug to the community. This is a great program. We're very excited to offer it. I think if you would talk to anybody who participated over the last 2 years, I think they enjoy learning a little bit about who we are, what we do, and the services we provide. This year, the CPA will run from September 9 through November 11. It will last 10 weeks. We will meet one night a week for approximately 2 hours, 6:30 to 8:45 at night, and we'll cover a variety of topics to include our department introduction, orientation, patrol operations, traffic enforcement, use of force, active shooter, evidence collection and processing. And because we're unique with what we do on the fire side, we also throw in some fire prevention and education. One thing I want to say is, due to COVID, we're going to limit the class size to 8 participants, so we're reducing it by a third. It's usually 12, but to make sure that we have a proper space, if we're using any equipment and we need to properly sanitize the equipment as we get involved with active scenarios, we just want to make sure that we're able to accommodate the class with appropriate social distancing measures. So due to COVID-19, we will be limiting it to the first 8 applications received, and we will begin accepting applications on this Thursday, July 23rd. Tomorrow, the application and the announcement will be posted on the city website, and on Wednesday we should be seeing also an advertisement in the Oakwood Register as well for the CPA. It is free of charge, and it is open to any Oakwood resident or individual working within the city of Oakwood.
Is this presentation going to be put on our website, your PowerPoint? Is it already on there, or we can get that on there? I think that would be very helpful for the folks at home that would want to read some of those slides in more detail. Yeah. I just think that, we've been saying here for a long time, we've got the best public safety department we've probably ever had in the history of Oakwood. They provide outstanding service, and the fact that they're cross-trained in all 3 disciplines is just so unique. And so I think our citizens need to be somewhat wary of one-size-fits-all standards coming out of Columbus, because we are unique, and frankly we're better, and maybe the people in Columbus ought to take some of the things that we're doing and apply those statewide, as opposed to trying to push something down on us that we've already been doing a very fine job for a very long time. So as you know, it's not just you, it's your whole staff, but I mean, please let them know that everyone on council really appreciates the efforts that they deal with on a daily basis, especially in these troubled times.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.